Welcome back to Breakfast with Pip and Michael. Joining us to go through what is making the news now is writer and podcaster Lewis Oakley and showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci. And Lewis, let's start with motorway restrictions being scrapped.
So the 60-mile-an-hour limit on the M1 and M6 is being scrapped. It was the speed limit was lowered in 2021, and what they basically found is that emissions have fallen because it was all about being green and curbing air emissions. It has fallen, but they're saying it's probably because of hybrid cars, of electric cars, and they're just saying that there's no real benefit to keeping it at 60 miles an hour now, which I do think, I've got to say, is a good thing, because I think there are so many pieces of legislation and rules brought in to try and make sure that things are green and curb our carbon emissions, that actually when one shows up and they think that actually has no benefit to it, that they scrap it. So I think it is important as we try and get to this greener future that we say, that one didn't really work, let's get rid of it, let's go back to 70 miles an hour.
Well, that's what I just wanted to be clear on. 70 miles per hour is how it
Yes,
will
so it'll be 70,
future.
it'll go back up to 70.
Yeah, I agree. It's a most unusual example, because normally once a regulation is in, what is so depressing about it is you can never get rid of it.
You can never admit that they're wrong.
Because, well, they never want to admit they're wrong, but also it's very hard to campaign against things because it makes it sound like you're in favour of more motor accidents or you're in favour of more pollution. So these things, once they're in, are very difficult to get rid of.
Does that 10 miles per hour make a huge difference when it comes to air pollution?
As well, they've said the average speed is 60 anyway, so it's not really changing much. There was no point in doing it. They had a try, didn't really do anything, they've scrapped it.
Another trip down memory lane from me is that in the 70s, when we had an oil crisis, we had a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit everywhere. We all crawled around at 50 miles an hour because that was meant to save on fuel. And for many years, much of the United States had a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. And I mean, it's really quite difficult to drive at 50
well,
or
with the
55.
amount of roadworks on our motorways, there often are 50 mile per hour speed limits, which I know about only too well because I've got fined for for going over the limit. I think I was doing 60 and a 50, and I got done. OK. We won't labour on that. So let's talk about Willy Wonka, Stephanie. The Willy Wonka experience, which turned into a complete disaster.
You know, Willy Wonka promises to be a chocolate dream come true, but for kids in Glasgow that went to this so-called immersive experience, they were left in tears. Hundreds of parents spent £35 and they were expecting their kids would be treated to an enchanted garden, a twilight tunnel.
We're looking at some pictures now,
an imagination lab, but instead they got this empty warehouse. Their kids were given half cups of lemonade, small rations of jelly beans, and most of the kids were left in tears, and I would hate to be a parent that took their child there.
It doesn't look completely compelling, does it?
Not at all. And do you know what? We were talking about AI in the last hour, and the House Illuminati, who create the production, said that most of the marketing had been generated by AI, so they hadn't actually had all the stuff that they were promising people. The organiser now is promising to give refunds, but I think that's just horrible. No one wants to expect that in an event, but especially an event for small children. It can actually prove quite traumatic.
It's an awful story. You've got to think about how upset those children would be. But what I love about this story is that it's so awful that now more people are wanting to go. I've seen online because they want to take pictures and say, look, I was there. Look how awful it is.
Do you remember that funny hill that was built at Hyde Park Corner at the...
Oh, yes.
No, Marble Arch. It was built at Marble Arch at the end of Oxford Street. This enormous mountain appeared. And it was the most terrible flop, wasn't it? It sounds a bit like that.
Actually, I did see that, and I was going to make a point of going and walking up it.
Curiosity.
one of the very few people. But this story reminds us of the Santa's grottos. There's been several of those over the years that have been
horrible. And I just think,
terrible.
where are the organisers' integrity? You know, did they really think that the parents and the kids were going to come in and be like, wow, we're so impressed with this shambles?
I love the idea that AI is now an excuse. I said something absolutely dreadful, but my speech was written by AI. Well, that's a perfect excuse, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The dog ate my homework.
Lewis, in The Sun today, Palisades, a blasting these wild conspiracy theories about the Princess of Wales's health, and boy, are they wild. I mean, we're not even going to talk about what they are
about. But there is a lot of them. Even on my own Twitter feed, I kind of thought I'd hit an algorithm. Why is this all about Kate? But there is just such a volume of things that are being generated, and obviously it ties into people want to know more about what's wrong with her and what's going on. I will say, obviously, the palace put out a statement, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and I did think the tone of that statement was a bit standoffish.
Doing well.
Doing well, but also, as we told you, there'll be updates at Easter, and that stands.
Why is this standoffish?
I just felt that it could have been more of, she thanks you for your concerns, and, you know, she's doing well and she's excited to be coming back after Easter, as we said. I just felt the tone was a little off. But I will say, you know, it's her business. I know that there's a lot of debate. Is it our business? I think it's her business. I think what you've got to also think is whatever she is unwell with, if she were to come out and talk about it, she would then become the spokesperson for it. She would then be expected to be part of the patrons and the charities for whatever it is. To be constantly talking about it.
Except her father-in-law, King Charles, has talked about
his condition, prostate and cancer, and
that was his choice, but it's done a huge amount of good. So you could say, if Kate was more open, it could also do a huge amount of good.
It could definitely do good, but it's not her responsibility. She's been struck down with something, we don't know what, and it's up to her if she wants to make that public and do more on it. And if she just wants to keep it to herself, and that's it, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, definitely. I think the palace should have kept quiet, to be honest. I don't think they needed to release this statement. And I think, you know, if Kate did disclose her condition, she would become the poster girl for whatever condition she has. And if you're ill with a sickness, you know, it's nice to get well wishes, but I think as well, knowing that people are prying into it can actually derail your recovery as well. So maybe I think that's why Kate is choosing to be quiet.
I'd like any member of the public to use his or her imagination to think about what it would be really like if all your medical conditions were all over every newspaper every morning. Let's try and do that thought exercise to understand what it would be like.
Yeah. It's a good idea. We are going to be talking about that soon as well in the next hour with two royal commentators. So stay with us for that. First, your weather with Alex Burkill.